He's a former police officer. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, did 2 combat tours, and during his childhood, he was a victim of ongoing child abuse. He's here to talk about his recovery process and much more. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Joining us from Texas, we have Joe Smorrow on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Joe is a really interesting guy. He was a former San Antonio police officer. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, did 2 combat tours, left home at the ripe old age of 15, became a father at 17, joined the Marines, and by the way, he also, I would say successfully, and that we'll have him tell the story, overcame a childhood history that contained a lot of abuse. His website is solutionpointplus.com. That's solutionpointplus.com. Joe, thanks for being a guest on the show. Thanks for your service. Both very much appreciated.
Thank you, John. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you sharing your audience with me.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And there's before we go into your story, there's one thing that I hear a lot of people say negatively about police is that, oh, they overcame abuse, that's why he became police. And I'm like, yeah, what's the problem with that? Because I don't know about you, my life was rather idyllic growing up as a child. I didn't have the things that you did. However, I went through bullying and all that stuff as well, and it's not necessarily a negative.
It's all life experience and perspective, right? I think all of our childhood experiences develop our frame of reference in which we view the world and see the world. I imagine that, again, just from the work I do, there are a lot of first responders that have troubled pasts, but I don't know that that's like the reason they join public safety. In fact, most of them that I have met or trained or dealt with across the country, some of them always knew policing is what they wanted to do, but a lot of them are like, I'm not actually sure. I just needed a job. I needed some security, or I got out of the military, and so I just kind of found this. Yes, there are some that like grew up knowing they wanted to do it, but that's not everybody. It certainly wasn't me. I just found myself in the field and then trying to make the most of it.
See, I was the type of person where it was a calling, it was a vocation, and I knew, I would say shortly after high school, about junior year of high school, that was what I wanted to go into. I didn't know everything that came along with the territory, but I had a pretty good idea, or at least that's so I thought.
Yeah, I think it's hard to, unless you have the family or you're a child of a police officer, I think it's really hard to conceptualize how difficult the role is. And again, there's so much sensationalism that we get on TV and media, and, you know, growing up watching cops, and you just see all the high speed stuff, but you don't realize that, like, oh, they're shooting for several days just trying to get this like 1 8-minute clip.
Right.
And a lot of police work is boredom. And so, yeah, it's interesting that unless you have some firsthand knowledge or experience, it's really hard to prepare mentally for what you're about to embark on.
I think it was Joseph Womble was a big influence on my formative years. And by the way, I came on police work in Baltimore in 1980. And a lot of the guys who trained me, I say guys, it's men and women, but that particular time, the guys that trained me were combat veterans from Vietnam. And they didn't play around. They were really good police. And we had a few command staff, they're Korean War veterans. When I say guys, that means men and women in police work. The women didn't serve as combat veterans back then. I don't know what they do today, and I don't profess to be an expert, but your role going from Marine Corps to police work is not unusual.
Correct. Yeah, honestly, I got out of the Marine Corps after my second tour, which was the invasion of Iraq in 2003. I was with the 1st Marine Division, and then my EAS was coming up. And I was like, all right, well, I was already a father. My daughter was going to be almost 5. I had rarely seen her at all because of being deployed so much. And so I was like, I want to get out. Plus, I was tired of being deployed. I lost friends over in Iraq, whether to combat or to suicide. And so I was like, I've had enough. No matter how much of this tax-free reenlistment bonus they're going to throw at me cash while I'm over here in Iraq, my answer is no. And so then when I got out, my best friend, who's now my business partner with Solution Point Plus, but we met in the Marine Corps, and he's from South Texas. And so he's like, hey, because I'm from New York originally, and I didn't want to go back to the winters of New York, and I couldn't afford to stay in California. I don't blame you.
I've had it with the winters of Baltimore and New York in the Mid-Atlantic.
Oh, yeah.
Forget it. It's too cold.
Yeah. So I ended up in South Texas and then just needing a job. And it was like, well, I guess I'll go try out for the police academy. And it was like a year-long process at the time back in 2004, 2005. But finally got accepted into the academy in 2005. And our academy is about 8 months long. And then, just started my policing career after that.
When you were going through the application process to become a police officer, and you said earlier in the conversation this was not something that was on your radar, you just basically needed a job. But did you have any doubts that they would hire you?
No, I didn't have any doubts. I mean, again, I think, knowing that, like, with the test even, you get 5 preferential points for being a veteran. Like, I knew that there was we had an advantage by being veterans, that we were going to have, 5 extra points on the test, which was going to give us that competitive advantage. So I knew that they were wanting veterans to join. And then it's just a matter of, passing the MMPI and making sure you're not a psychopath. But, it wasn't super hard. And it's kind of one of the problems I have, John, is that, it's not incredibly difficult to qualify to become a police officer. And I do advocate that, we should, and I know people don't like this, and I get a lot of pushback because a lot of departments are already short-staffed and they don't have enough people already. But the answer to me is not to continue to lower standards, which has been happening, and just accept whatever comes. I think we need to make it more competitive, and that's across the board, and I think pay more and everything else, but it should be more difficult to get into this job just because it requires so much.
Well, one of the things, and I tend to agree with you, I don't want to make it more difficult to fill the ranks. Look, here's my point of view. When I called 911, and I'm in South Florida, when I called 911, it's usually for a medical emergency. And usually the people that show up first are police, or in this case, the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. And I don't want the B team. I don't want the C team, and I certainly don't want the bench warmers showing up. I want the best of the best. So I want someone to be there, but I want the best to show up. And a lot of people don't give our police nowadays enough credit. A lot of them are military veterans. A lot of them have college degrees. A lot of them speak multiple languages. And they also, in addition to law enforcement, which is no small task, just keeping track of what the Supreme Court says and departmental policies, you've got to be a psychologist. You got to be a therapist. You got to be a medical doctor. You got to do EMT work. You got to do everything. They ask a lot. So we're talking with Joe Smorrow, and we're going to return to our conversation. We'll talk about some of what he went through his childhood that may have been an issue with his police work. He's a Marine Corps veteran, did 2 combat tours, and you can find him online at solutionpointplus.com. That's solutionpointplus.com. Do you want to be a guest on Law Enforcement Talk Radio show and podcast? It's really quite simple. And before you get into this notion that I'm not a cop, I wasn't a cop, I don't have something to contribute. Well, the show is about investigating crime. That's one aspect of it from the real life perspective of those who did it. And then it's also about trauma, how trauma impacted them, often crime-based, but not always, how it affected their lives, and how they rebuilt their lives after. If you want to be a guest, just contact me. It's really simple. Send an email to jay@letradio.com. That's jay@letradio.com. Or go to letradio.com and the Contact Us page, and you can get me right there as well. And this is Law Enforcement Talk Radio show. We'll take a short break. I promise you, we'll be right back. There's a couple ways you can stay in touch and keep informed of what's going on with the Law Enforcement Talk Radio show. Number one, Go to our website, letradio.com. Sign up for our email newsletter. It's real easy to find. I promise we don't spam you. I send out about one email every 2 weeks or so. And there's also a feature called Broadcast Channels on our Facebook page, where we send messages directly to your inbox, directly to your messenger. Real easy to sign up for. Make sure you like or follow the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. And up top, you'll see broadcast channels, one for free podcast versions of the radio show, another one top post of the day. So you too can stay informed quickly, easily, and best of all, like always, free. Return conversation with Joe Samaro. He's a former San Antonio Police Department police officer. He's a Marine Corps veteran, did 2 combat tours in the Marines, and he had an in-custody death, which we'll talk about a little bit later on when he's a probationary officer with San Antonio Police Department. He is the CEO and founder of SolutionPointPlus.com, that's SolutionPointPlus.com. Now, Joe, and I'm saying this not as a way of passing judgment on you. You had a checkered childhood. You went through, there wasn't the white picket fence and all this stuff. You went through a lot of child abuse throughout your life, didn't you?
Yeah, I sure did. And it started, it's interesting. I've been in some form of treatment for the last 13, 14 years, and still with all of it, whether it's just cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, part of my therapeutic journey, but I still have no memories prior to 7 years old. And my parents were married really young, straight out of high school. My father was in the Navy, so we were stationed down in Norfolk, Virginia.
Hey, it's where I grew up. By the way, I spent most of my childhood in Norfolk, Virginia Beach.
Oh, wow. Yeah, very cool. So yeah, he was in the Navy, and he was on his routine 6-month med float. And while he was gone, my mom, I suppose, got lonely and had needs, and so she started having an affair with another sailor. And he would come to the house frequently, and to be with my mom. It was kind of playing dad, but then at some point it wasn't enough, and then he turned to me, and so then the sexual abuse started. And the thing in that story that really sticks out, because this went on for several months. And I told my mom at some point, I said, hey, come to my room and doing this stuff, and he's making me do this stuff to him. And she was like, no, we don't talk like that. You don't say those things. That gets people in trouble. And I was like, oh, okay. So I just assumed it was normal. But the reason I'm so passionate about the work I do now is because of what happened next and how it was handled. And I have no ill will towards the firemen, because my belief is people are truly doing the best they can with what they have based on what they know. But yeah, so my mom didn't respond the way that I had hoped she would. So it was a weekend, Saturday or Sunday morning, late morning. My sister was in the bathtub. My mom was on the couch, and she was actually taking a nap, and she used to be a smoker. So I went into her purse. I got a book of matches. I went into my bedroom. This is all on base housing, and shut the door. And I laid underneath my bed, and I was attempting to set my bed on fire. And I didn't know at 7 years old that, mattresses are flame retardant, but it's brilliant. And so I jokingly say that's the day I knew I was going to become an entrepreneur, because I just didn't give up, right? And so I kept lighting matches, and I kept lighting matches, and it eventually burnt a little hole in the fabric to where I could get my hand through and then hold a match to the wood frame. And it eventually caught fire. And so then I obviously panicked. I ran out of the room. I banged on the bathroom door, got my sister out, woke up my mom. We went outside, and the fire department showed up real quick on base, and it wasn't catastrophic. It didn't burn the house down, but it certainly burnt my entire bed, charred the floor and part of the wall. But the firemen came out, and I'm just standing out there, and, I knew what I had done probably wasn't right, but I definitely didn't expect what happened next, which was this fireman come out real aggressive. And, this was my first introduction to the knife hand before I got into the Marine Corps. And he leans down, and he's yelling at me. And he's like, young man, if you ever start another fire again, you will spend the rest of your life in prison. Do you understand me? And I just started crying. And I was like, oh, my God, I don't want to go to prison. I'm like, whoa. And I grabbed my mom, and I'm like, please help me. Like, I don't want to go to prison. I'm scared. And it was like, in hindsight, after I went through everything else in life, and I'm happy to go more into what happened right after that. But, it was like, this is why I'm so passionate about training people as well, is, all behavior is communication. And I wish that fireman would have had some training to be like, okay, surely this is not a 7-year-old arsonist. Let me just have the insight to pull him to the side and say, hey, buddy, what are you doing? Like, why did you set your bed on fire? Is there something you're trying to communicate to us? But instead of him offering me hope, he threatened me. And I see this a lot with people still as parents or as public safety, where when we don't understand or recognize the behavior someone else is doing, we tend to threaten them instead of being curious as to why they're doing it.
And how old were you when this occurred?
This is all 7, 8 years old.
Okay.
And so then my sister, who's 3 years older, she was 10 at the time, and she calls our grandmother up in New York, my dad's mom, and tells her what's happening. This is like 1989. She calls my dad on a naval ship, tells him what's going on. He flies home, and then it was a mess. He ended up getting into an altercation with the guy, and so he ends up getting kicked out of the Navy because of it and how he handled it. And so then we moved up to New York, and I remember being in court. My parents are getting divorced. My mom's fighting for custody. She had no chance. My dad got custody, but I didn't go to school my 3rd grade year because I was in therapy 3 days a week. I was in and out of court. My mom had supervised visitation. I mean, it was just a mess. And then for the next 8 years, my dad, I guess, because he just couldn't deal with, and I have empathy in hindsight, but in a 96-hour period, he learned that his wife had cheated on him, his kid's been molested, he's kicked out of the military, and now he's back up in New York and trying to find his way. And so he just became a raging alcoholic and was physically abusive. And, we had no relationship. He would just violently abuse me when he would come home from work at night, or I would only see him maybe on Sundays, just, drinking and watching football. And we just didn't really ever have a connection. And so I remember at 15 years old, I came home from school one day and the house just reeked of marijuana. He's gone at work. My stepmom is having sex with some guy while he's working. It's like 3 p.m. And I was like, what is happening? And so that night I told him, I said, hey, Dad, I said, his girlfriend, I said, he's having sex with some guy while you're working? And he was like, yeah, I kind of figured, we haven't been together in months. She just has nowhere to go. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm leaving. I'm tired of being here. I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm out. And so I just left. I started staying with friends, staying after school as much as I could, just doing sports, extracurricular, whatever I could get involved with to just avoid being home, I would. And I just avoided home as much as possible. And then my junior year is when my girlfriend from 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade, her parents finally were like, hey, come stay with us for a little while. And so it was a blessing. And my joke, and this is a joke to the audience, but when I do a lot of keynotes as well, John, around the country. And so when I'm telling this story, I say, I was a junior in high school. I was playing sports. I didn't have a job. And so I was like, well, I really want to thank her parents. I want to give them something for taking me in. And so I didn't have money. So I was like, what can I do? And then I was like, oh, I know, I'm going to get their daughter pregnant. That was my gift. Don't recommend it, but my daughter's now 25 and she's doing well. But that's why I joined the Marine Corps, was because I became a father my senior year of high school. It wasn't out of patriotism or I just want to go join the military. I truly was going to go to college and play soccer because I was really good at it and I enjoyed it, and that was going to be my escape. And then when my girlfriend and I got pregnant, it was like, well, that changes things, and so now I have to do something more responsible to take care of my family, and so that's why I joined the Marine Corps. And that was in 2000,
really got
pre-9/11.
Suddenly real for you, and you had all these responsibilities. And by the way, I'm not a military veteran, but had I had the opportunity to live my life over, I'd have probably gone to the Navy. I'd have probably done something for 3-4 years instead of minimum wage jobs being under my parents' thumb. I highly advocate doing that and just getting out and seeing the world. We're talking about Joe Smorrow. Joe was a San Antonio police officer. He was talking about it for a few moments. He had an in-custody death while he's still probationary. Before that, he's a Marine Corps veteran, did do combat tours, and experienced a lot of abuse through his childhood, which we started talking about. He's one of the CEOs and founders of SolutionPointPlus.com. That's SolutionPointPlus.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. return conversation with Joe Smaro on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Joe is a former San Antonio Police Department police officer. He's a United States Marine Corps veteran, and he is a father. They became a father at 17. He did 2 combat tours and experienced a lot of child abuse, which we talked about a little bit in the last segment. We'll return to that conversation in a little bit. He is the CEO and founder of SolutionPointPlus.com, the SolutionPointPlus.com. And by the way, Joe, and he's contacted us from Texas. You said earlier in the conversation, this is probably my entrepreneur moment when I just didn't give up. And sometimes that resonated me. I don't know why. A lot of people don't do what I do, and they go, oh, man, why don't you give up? Because I don't know how. What's the old line from the movie? I don't know how not to. So you became, after serving the Marine Corps and doing 2 combat tours, and I understand why you wanted to not be deployed again, which we can return to in a moment. You became a San Antonio Police Department police officer. And while you're probationary, a lot of people don't understand. You said the academy was about 8 months long for you guys. It was 6 months for us at the time. We had constant training going on, daily roll calls, at least twice a week. It was about training about laws and departmental procedures. Then we had yearly in-service training, 4 of which was in a classroom. So the whole reason I'm bringing that was the people talking about training. But when you're probationary, when you graduate, you're a probationary officer for 1 year in Baltimore, and they can fire you for any reason. You had an in-custody death, which is something that is a real attention getter for a lot of people, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. And sadly, it's kind of like one of those badge of honors of, it's like once you have an in-custody death and a divorce, welcome to the ranks of policing. Yeah. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's just kind of what the culture has created. But yes, and not only was it in my probationary period, it was 1 day before my 1 year anniversary, because it's the same as you mentioned, John, with Baltimore. It's once you graduate the academy, you are on 1 year of at-will employee, basically, where they can get rid of you for any mistakes. So you're doing everything by the book. You're trying to do everything right, just following every P's and Q's and dotting your I's and crossing your T's, and your report writing, everything's so important. And I was working the overnight shift, and I got a call, just for a guy with blue basketball shorts, no shirt, no shoes, yelling and screaming in a parking lot at an apartment complex. And we used to have split roll calls. So we had a 10 p.m. to 6 and then a 10:30 to 6:30. And I was the 10P to 6A, and we were super lean because we were just to get out there to get a couple bodies to relieve B shift. And then 10:30 was the heavier side of the shift. Well, it was terrible, perfect storm of timing, but I didn't have cover at this time. And San Antonio is a big city. I mean, we're 2 million people. Our department's about 2,400 sworn officers, so it's a good-sized agency. But so getting cover is never a problem unless it's this perfect moment of being at shift change. And the other couple officers were tied up on report calls, missing persons, things like that. So I show up to this parking lot. The guy's standing there, matching the description, with another guy, and they're super chill. Like, he's just leaning against the car, staring into space. So I'm like, okay, no problem. I get out, park my car, walk up. I'm like, hey, guys, I got a call because actually you here in the shorts were screaming. I see you're not now. Is everything cool? And the other guy, not matching the description, was like, yeah, we're good. He's my brother. He's just, he was just going off about something, but all is well. I said, okay, cool. I'm not going to mess with anything. Just give me your ID real quick. I can scratch out that I contacted you and I'm leaving. So he gives me his driver's license, no problem. The one matching the description hasn't looked at me, hasn't said a word, hasn't moved. He's just got what I now know is flat affect, staring into space. And so I'm like, hey, bud, can I get your name? No response. Hey, buddy, just give me your name and birthday. Like, I'm going to get out of here. I'm not going to mess with you.
One of these guys looking right through you, or just he's not looking at you?
Not even looking at me, just staring up into space. And so I asked the brother, because he told me they were brothers, and I'm like, hey man, what's his name? And he's like, well, officer, come on. And I'm like, no, I don't know. I was like, dude, I'm not here to mess with y'all. Now I'm going to be honest with you, John. I know I just said doing everything by the book, but this was car cam, pre-body cam, and so I'm fresh out of the Marine Corps, I had perspective. I had some good life experience. I wasn't in any danger or threat at this moment. And so I used to try to play with people a little bit, to be funny, to be cool, to try to fit in and just break the mold a little bit. So I was telling him, I'm like, hey, bro, I was like, look, you can just lie to me. Like, I'm not even going to go run your name. I said, I'm a boot still. I have to write a report saying I contacted you. So just make some stuff up. Just make up whatever name you want, whatever birthday you want. I'm going to write that down and I'm going to leave. Just trying to be playful, and still nothing. Like, didn't break his bearing. He's still staring off. And I was like, this is so bizarre. So I was like, all right, man, come on. You're going to walk to my car now. Because now I'm like, maybe he's got a warrant that he doesn't want me to know about. And if he would have just given me a name, I would have left. So that was the hard part to end the story of when Wendy ended up dying, and I'll share it here in a second. But it was like, man, if he just gave me his name and birthday, like, I would have left. But he didn't. And so I'm telling him, like, hey, we're going to walk to my car. I got to figure out at least what your name is, and then I'm going to let you go. I promise you I'm not trying to mess with you. Still no response. We get over to my car, and as soon as we get to my car, he puts his hands behind his back. And I was like, hey, man, I'm not arresting you. Like, just relax. Like, you're not under arrest. And he puts his hands behind his back. So I'm like, all right. So I grabbed his hands, and probably a little lackadaisical because I was just confused of what was happening. And so I was like, I'm just going to detain him until I can figure out what's going on. So as soon as I unclipped my handcuff, he pulled away, leaned forward, turned around, punched me in the face. And I'm like, oh, okay. So now this is different. So then the fight's on, right? I drop my handcuffs, take him to the ground. We're just grappling. And what was so weird about this, John, because I had been in a couple like police scuffles already in that first year. But what was strange about this one is as soon as we went to the ground, he started screaming and specifically screaming, saying,
the worst shooting
help me,
I was
please.
in.
He's going to kill me. He's killing me. I'm going to die. The police are going to kill me. Sorry?
I thought the worst shooting I was in was a guy screaming. And he literally took me and him off the ground.
Yeah. No, it's just this agitated, they call it used to be excited delirium back when that was allowed, and now it's like agitated delirium, and there's all kinds of whatever words, and I'll keep it apolitical, but that's what the medical examiner ruled it as. But we had no idea. So I'm by myself. This fight went on for 7 minutes and 24 seconds by myself, just grappling.
It's a long time, bro.
I purposely was not striking
in a
him.
Fight.
It is a long time. It is a long time, yeah. And the problem was nobody knew I was fighting. I had no cover on the way. And because I was just trying to do jujitsu, I needed both of my arms. And so I was like, oh, I need to ask for help because I'm getting tired. And anytime I would because he was trying to break my hand, I had him like in a bear hug on the ground, and he was trying to like snap my wrist. And anytime I tried to like break my hand to key up on my radio to ask for help, he was able to get to his feet. And so then, I take him back down, and I just remember purposely thinking, I know his brother's here. We're in an apartment complex. It's like 10:30 at night, and because he's screaming so much, people are coming out. And it was like an old high school fight. I've got about 35 people surrounding me in a circle. They got the old Motorola Razr flip phones, right? This is back in like 06. And I'm hearing all kinds of chaos, but I just don't have help. And as soon as I heard the sirens in the background, I remember telling him, his name was Michael. I was like, Michael, I'm like, look, man, this is not going to go well for you. When these guys show up, like, it's going to get bad. Like, just let me handcuff you and it's done. And he's screaming, just won't listen to me. So then the cavalry shows up, we do the blue octopus. But here's what's important, truly, is nobody took anything off their belt. There was no taser, no pepper spray, no baton, nothing. It was just 4 of us guys that were trying to get him into handcuffs. And as soon as we got him handcuffed, he died. Like, as soon as we handcuffed him, his heart just exploded. He had a cardiopulmonary arrest, and we called the ambulance. They were rocking the box trying to save him, and he died. And I was like, oh, no. And so I was riding a desk for about 8 weeks because, the in custody, the criminal side cleared very quick, but the civil side was like almost about 2.5 years of 8 of their family members suing me personally, the police department, and the city of San Antonio for millions of dollars. And they ended up getting nothing, of course. Nothing was done wrong, but it was just, he was on so much cocaine, had recently just had like a heart surgery, and he was like a 35-year-old man, but on a bunch of cocaine. And just with that level of exertion over about 8 minutes, 8.5 minutes, his heart couldn't take it. And as soon as we got him restrained, he died. And so I was terrified, thinking I was going to get fired.
Joe Samaro, and we'll return conversation. He's a former San Antonio Police Department officer. He's going to tell us more about the in-custody death while he's still a probationary officer. Don't go anywhere. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. We'll be right back.
How would would you like a free ebook on tips to improve your health? We're talking about tips you can use for free to add years to your life. Best of all, the ebook is free to download at lethealthy.com. When we say free, we mean free, so you can download the free ebook to improve your physical health, all while preserving your financial health. Get the ebook for free today at lethealthy.com. That's at lethealthy.com. Again, the website is lethealthy.com.
Current conversation with Joe Samaro on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Joe is a former San Antonio Police Department police officer. He is a Marine Corps veteran, did 2 combat tours, and he overcame, and I'm saying the word overcame, but a life filled with child abuse, which we'll talk about in a few moments. And he is the CEO and founder of SolutionPointPlus.com. That's SolutionPointPlus.com. Returning to conversation, you're talking about this in-custody death, and we have a lot of the situations in the news nowadays about people dying from drug and alcohol overdoses and they're in police custody, and this big thing is they're kneeling on them and they can't breathe and they're prone, all this stuff. The main thing is I never had an in-custody death, which is really good news. It doesn't mean I didn't have my battles. I did. I had plenty of them. As a matter of fact, more than I care to remember. But this one, you can't help. Did you feel like you were riding the desk? You talked about the civil suit, all that stuff. Did you feel like, oh, my goodness, what has happened? And I didn't come this far to wind up in this predicament.
Yeah, 100%. And honestly, a big reason why I got out of the Marine Corps was because I was tired of being around death, causing death, contributing to death, seeing death. And I know some people are like, well, then why the heck would you become a cop? And honestly, because it was stability, it was a career path, it was good benefits and decent pay for who I was at the time, a 22-year-old with no college degree. So that's why I did it. It was just to continue to take care of my family. The reality is when that situation happened, it made everything very real for me, and it put me into a dark, dark depression. And everything worked out to where, I mean, obviously for my career, I didn't get fired. Like everything cleared. They didn't get paid out any money. Nothing was done wrong, but it still didn't matter to me. I went into a dark place where I was like, if this guy would have just gave me his name and birthday, like he would still possibly be alive. He was a father. Of course, the media portrays him as, a father of 5 and this like great guy, and maybe he was, but in that moment, he was on cocaine and decided to not comply and then assault me unprovoked. So choices.
He made bad choices.
It's unfortunate for sure.
And by the way, prison's full of people who make bad choices.
Yes, absolutely. And I just, the next 9-10 years, John, I actively worked to just destroy my life. And I'm not saying this to be funny or, crass at all, but like, we all have something. We have vices, drugs, something illegal, legal, whatever it is. And I started turning more to pornography, to alcohol, and then eventually women. And by the time I was 31 years old, I already had 3 divorces, 4 kids from 3 different women, paying over $3,000 a month in child support on a cop salary. And I was struggling. But that was all of my choices. I was so angry at myself. I hadn't dealt with my childhood stuff. I hadn't dealt with my military stuff. And now I've got this police thing. And I just hated myself so much and was so insecure that I was using women as a way to just feel anything. And it was terrible. And then I decided to go to the VA about 13 years ago and say, I don't know what's wrong with me, but something's wrong with me. I need help. And I've never looked back. And so I started getting treatment, various forms of treatment, and I've just stayed involved with it because it has truly saved my life, transformed my life. And then even on the department, I got onto the mental health unit eventually and became a huge advocate, dove headfirst into the mental health arena, and that really did transform my career, open up my mind to what I want to do with my life, and that's what set me up for where I am today.
See, none of this surprised me as a police officer or sergeant. And we had a standing joke in Baltimore, and we had a lot of guys that came from other parts of the United States. But we could have a guy that would come from Ohio. He'd be happily married. He'd be the father of 3. He'd be like a choir boy. He'd be great. And then within 3 or 4 years, he's living in the basement of some house with a stripper and divorced and he's drinking too much. And the key indicator as a police officer and sergeant was someone that was not their nature, and all of a sudden they're mouthing off, they're screaming at people, they're losing it, they're being unprofessional. That's usually the indication that they're struggling with something. Was that an issue with you?
That I was super fortunate that all of my stuff was outside of work because, and this is why I'm such an advocate for the mental health of first responders, is because when I see them, to the point you just made there, as a former sergeant, when you see your men and women change character, their personality shifts. They start to lose their minds on calls. They're yelling at people. And especially now with body cameras, it's like, you're getting jammed up for this. But this is the byproduct of unprocessed trauma. And I truly believe, like you said, you got a choir boy comes in, he just wants to be a public servant. He's out there doing great work. And within 3 to 4 years, he's hitched up with a stripper, going through a divorce, losing everything he owns. And it's like, well, what happened? What happened was he didn't deal with the traumas that he was saturated in. He didn't deal with the job and didn't know how to process it, didn't know how to turn it off. And so then the adrenaline, the drug seeking of dopamine, all of that took over. And I can find that, I can create that through women, through substances, through pornography, through food, through alcohol. And that's what sadly many of them do.
And I was no stranger to that. I self-medicated with alcohol. I've been sober now, it'll be 34 years. And I tell people all the time, I don't understand the correlation between trauma and alcohol. I do, but for me, it's like throwing gasoline on a fire. I turn into the guy you don't want to be around. And I stop eating, and I stop doing all this stuff. And whatever healthy mechanisms I've learned along the way go out the window.
Yep.
So you're kind of talking to the choir. But it's obvious, Joe, that you've made a lot of progress in this. And you had the trauma not just from police work, and that's significant, but you also had trauma from being deployed in combat twice in the Marine Corps. And then you had, on top of that, all the stuff you went through in your childhood. That's like the holy trinity of aha moments.
A lot of life experience and wisdom to share, for sure. Which is, again, I think it's, I live my life by this quote that I love, and it says that I've learned to become grateful for the things I wish never happened. Yeah. And truly reframing all of those horrible things that happened in my life, I now see them as blessings that I was afforded the opportunity to go through those so that now I can be a light in someone else's darkness. And I truly believe that. And so the fact that I get to speak and teach and train and write books and all this stuff to help people based on my experience, not just theory, and I'm not knocking academia. I think academics is great, but when you just operate from theory and textbook, it doesn't connect or resonate with as many people as it does when you've lived it. And so to bring both of those to the forefront has really allowed me to live the blessed life that I have now.
One of the things I tell people, and it's kind of shocking, the people tell me, oh, you need to meet my son or my daughter. They want to become a police officer. And the first piece of advice I give them is one they don't expect. I said, if you go to a doctor once a year, get a physical. You go to your dentist once a year and you get a checkup. Get yourself a trauma-informed therapist and go proactively. And don't wait for the department to send you. You're going to encounter stuff that's going to change you mentally. Be proactive about it. Yep. And when I tell them that, it's all of a sudden stuff gets real. But when that guy died, you can't help but say things just go to a whole new level.
Oh, yeah. No, I took ownership. Like, this is my fault. This is all on me. What a terrible person. Like, I can't believe I did this. Like, this poor guy. Just incredible empathy came out of me when it was, and again, there's some officers that are just like, and I recognize it now for what it is, and they're in their own self-preservation and survival mode and probably have their own compounding trauma they've never dealt with. But a lot of them are just like, dude, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, no, and just real kind of cold and callous towards it. But I'm like, no, man, this is a serious thing here. Like, we're talking about someone's life ending after an interaction with police. Like, that's not something I want to be a part of. And so the fact that you're like getting kind of some clout and praise, it was the same in the military, honestly. When I was in Iraq, I remember the first time I was in Iraq, and this is a war zone, and I shot and killed a guy. I didn't like it. I didn't think it was fun. I wasn't like proud of myself. And the fact that my gunnery sergeant came over and just slammed me in my Kevlar helmet with his to celebrate me, I'm like, yeah, Smarro, you gotta kill. And I was like, all I want to do is go home, man. Like, I don't want to do this. I just want to go play soccer. Like, what the is going on? It was so overwhelming. And yet I continued to find myself surrounding it. And I was probably never truly mentally equipped or prepared for it because especially of what happened to me as a child.
We're going to transition because we're almost out of time. Your website is solutionpointplus.com. That's solutionpointplus.com. Can people reach out to you and find out what you're doing now today?
Absolutely. Yeah, there, any of the social media is Joe Smarro, and there's also a joesmarro.com. But yeah, solutionpointplus.com is the company website. It gives a great overview of all of our trainings, our keynotes, the things we're working on. It's a great place to find out what we're all about.
Joe, thank you so much for your service, and thanks for telling your story on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated.
Thank you, John. I appreciate your time, brother. Be well.
I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.